program Around the World in English, this time with Dr. Michael Garant from the University of Helsinki and Tampere in Finland, although his origin is American, and he is going to tell us a bit more about himself in a minute. Right? Thank you very much, Mike, for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm from the United States, and I came to Finland in 1987. And at that time, Finland only had about 8,500 foreign people living there, which made it proportionally, population-wise, per capita, the most closed country in Europe, except for Albania. And Albania was closed, right? And I've seen Finland change dramatically. Now there's maybe 130,000 foreigners there, which means I've actually seen the place become international. And when I first came there, I was studying Russian and English translation. And one of my teachers, John Hopkins from the translation department, who's retiring now soon, he had been in Finland since 1973. And he taught American studies courses. And it was very good to take his courses because I'd studied political science in the United States, which is a lot of American government, history, culture, but it's geared towards Americans. And I hadn't really taken a class before which explained like what the United States is to people that aren't Americans. And that's what John did very well. And so what I'm going to be speaking about today is very, very heavily influenced by John Hopkins. Let me see. And I have these handouts. Let me hand out these handouts. Wait a second. Can you get those? And so I think I'll talk about unity and diversity and American social structure. Here you can see America has about, United States rather, has about 300 million people in 2006. And one of the reasons I have the internet on here, let's see, is here you can see like the latest statistics. And you can see that since 2006, there's an additional 10 million people there, which shows that America is constantly growing. And if you see here, point 2, that they're continually growing, largely due to immigration, but also with a steady birth rate. If you think of a country like Finland, and I was talking to a guy last night in a bar, Spanish guy, and he said that in Spain, people don't have so many children anymore. And they have this declining birth rate. And in Finland, in the times of the people's now grandfathers, it was common to have 3 or 4 or 5 brothers and sisters. And now the Finnish family has maybe 1.2 statistically. But America isn't like that, that people that live there have kids, that they don't look at this, economic insecurity. And it's quite common for Americans to have 2, 3, 4 kids, 2, 3 kids maybe, okay? Anyway, and because of that, you can see here, you have an overall youth orientation, while you have a rapidly growing senior sector. And there's constant stimulus of new ideas and interplay of people with different backgrounds. So what does that mean? It means that if you think about like American culture and American television programs, which you may have seen, or movies, it's geared very much towards young people. And you don't see like, in the 70s you had like maybe Archie Bunker in All in the Family, right? If you remember this, it's pretty good. But you don't see so many shows about old people. And also, the senior sector. And so if you think about that, I've got that in quotation marks. I remember like my grandparents and my great-grandparents, my Grandma Horton and Annie, who was my great-grandmother, were born, they died when they were 102 and 103 years old. And they had been born in 1976. I was a pallbearer at their funeral. And they had been school teachers out in the Indian nations in Oklahoma during the Indian Wars. They were, Grandma Horton was 3 during the Battle of Little Bighorn when Custer was killed. right? And so you have this, and I look at them and they're quite old. And, you know, my memories of these old people. But when I look at my parents, I don't see them like that at all. I don't see them as old, right? If you think about, like, I don't know, Paul McCartney or Mick Jagger, are they really old? And so the seniors are becoming like eternally young, probably, as part of the cultural influences. And you don't really see like these crotchety old people unless they're like pushing 100, right? So when you think about the United States, you have to think about that. And also you have to think about the interplay between the people of different backgrounds. That, you know, we're a country based on immigration. And even now, take a guess, if you think about like the American population, okay, what percentage of people were born someplace else? Shout out the answer.
60.
60? Way high, way high. About 1 in 6. 1 in 6 per person was born someplace else, even now in the United States. And so because of that, you get this interplay of different cultures together. And people have to live together, and then you get this dynamic American culture which comes out of that. When the Soviet Union collapsed, you had lots of Russian immigrants who came to New York City, and all the cab drivers were Russians, right? And they were like, I love America, you know, and it was really nice. Now, lots of taxi drivers from the Middle East, right? And then you've got, you know, this 911 thing, right? And you've got these people that are saying, like, I don't like America. And so they you know, the people in New York missed the good old days when all the taxi drivers were Russian, right? But you'll see this. People come in, and then they become part of the culture, and they won't be taxi drivers for long, right? And you'll see this with waves of immigration. Point 3. In the United States, they take the census every 10 years. Okay? So it means that nobody really knows how many people actually live there because you're not registered anywhere. In Spain, do you have to register? Yes? They have like a population registry, right? And you're there. In Finland also, right? And they know exactly how many people there are on any given date. In the United States, nobody knows. So you've got like 311 million people, and the margin of error that is probably like 10 million, right? And so you've got like twice the population of Finland, right, which is 5 million people, and that's in this margin of error. How do they find out who lives there? That they have a census, which is taken every 10 years. Okay, census, U.S. Census for 2000. They're doing one now, right? Last one was conducted in 2000. And I got this here to show you the census form. And so what they do is, when they're taking the census, they hire people to be census takers. And then, like, if I was a student, I have friends that did that. And then what you do is, you have like these forms, and you go knock on people's doors, and you say, hi, I'm the census taker. Do you mind answering some questions? Okay? And maybe they say no. Or they say, yes, I mind, right? And they slam the door in your face, right? If they do answer, you know, yeah, sure, I'll answer the questions. So you can see this. I'll scroll this down fairly quickly. So there you've got the names, how many people live there, person up to 10 people per household, or 11. Then you ask them, first person, name, telephone number, male or female, what's your age now, what's your race, and you can see a long list of different kinds of race options here. I need a mouse. It keeps going, American Indian, Black, Asian, Filipino, Korean, etc. If something else, please write here. Some other race, print that there. Marital status. Have you been to college? Private college, public college. Okay? Just read these. I'm not going to read them out to you. You all know how to read, right? So just kind of skim these. I'm going to go through this quickly, right? And just skim through some of the questions and look at kind of like what kind of questions they ask. Did you own an apartment? Where did you live 5 years ago? Have you been in the Army? Are you in the Army now? Okay. How many people rode to work in a car last week? Number 23. 30. Last year, did you work? Income level. Can they ask your income in Spain, or is that a rude question? Can you say, like, how much money do you make? If you said that to somebody, is it like, hey, don't ask me that? Yeah, right? When was the place where you live first built? How many rooms? What's the actual price? Number 45. Oh, no, sorry. 45. How much electricity? How much is your electricity bill? Talk about government and bureaucracy, right? 53. We're down to 53. Okay, now we're at person 2. 53 questions, right? Think people answer 53 questions? You think, yeah, right? No, right? So it just shows how vague everything is in the United States as far as who lives there and what do they do, right? And it's something that you have to keep in mind when you're dealing with Americans and thinking about how they see themselves as people. With Americans, you can never be sure that who you're dealing with is really who you're dealing with, right? So for example, in Finland, right, that if you apply for a job, you have like your job and you make like a resume, and then you have these letters from previous employers that says this person worked here, right, from this date to this date, and they follow a particular format. What about in Spain? If you want to get a job, if you've been working for a few years, how does that work? More or less the same. Do they call your previous employers?
They might.
They might, but it's not a yes.
It is not a yes.
Yeah.
They might do it, but some people opt not to do it.
Yeah. In the U.S., you always call. Why? Because you want to find out if this person really is who they say they are. In the translation department in the University of Helsinki, they had a German guy who was teaching, the students like him, this was many years ago, and he was teaching translation in the university, and then one day he just disappeared. And they were like, where did he go? And we found out later that he had no papers, right? And that he had learned how to speak English as a bartender in like these NATO bases, serving American Marines, right? In Germany, and so he came to Finland, had a Finnish girlfriend, got a job teaching in the University of Helsinki, but with fake papers, right? There was a guy in Wisconsin who has been running, he'd been running a giant psychiatric hospital, right? And then he started like molesting little boys, right? And then they threw him in jail. And when they threw him in jail, they began looking into who this person was. And it turned out that the guy, he had a roommate. He went to the University of Wisconsin for 1 year, right? And his roommate from the first year ended up going to medical school, right, and getting a medical degree. So this guy knew this guy's birth date and social security number and all this because they'd been college roommates. And so he sent off and got the guy's papers that said he was a medical doctor, right? And he said, I'm a psychiatrist, right? So then you don't have to do surgery, right? You hand out some pills. He says, and I want to do administration. And the real doctors don't want to do that. So he was running like this giant psychiatric hospital in Wisconsin and would have done that until he retired had he been able to keep his hands off the patients, right? And so with Americans, you can never be sure like who you're dealing with. And it's something in their identity because you really have to think about that. Is this person who they say they are? And so Americans will start asking lots of questions like, okay, you're from here, da-da-da, do you know this person, do you know that person, just to find out if you're lying, right? And many people are, right? Something to think about. Finns don't do that, maybe a little bit. But Finnish people are pretty straightforward, and what they say is that's how that is, right? And so Finns will often not even call employers, previous employers, because they assume that what's on paper is what's on paper. So, point 4. How do they find out who you are? Okay? And you have your birth certificate, right? I won't pull that up because, well, anyway, you got a birth certificate, right? And your birth certificate has what? Your height, your weight, your eye color, your hair color at birth, right? Okay? And so you get a birth certificate, and then with that, you get a state driver's license also for non-operators, right? So then with Americans, you get a birth certificate. With that, you can get a social security card, right? With Finnish social security cards, numbers, it has your name, it has your birth date, and then 4 numbers afterwards, right? Do Spanish social security numbers have your birth date? No?
No.
No, okay. We'll stick to Finland here. Okay, so it has your birth date, right? And it has this other number, and the cops, the welfare office, all the social services, the hospitals, they can just key that in and tell everything about you, right? U.S. not. The U.S., you've got your driver's license, you've got your social security number, which are completely unrelated, and that's how you show who you are. So, for example, mafia people or gangsters or these hippies in the 60s that blew up cops and stuff like that, Black Panthers and the like, that what they would do, Abby Hoffman, right, is you go to the cemetery, right, and you find somebody who's like about your age, right, and then you send off to get their birth certificate, right, and then with that birth certificate, you can get your social security card, your driver's license, and then you've got a new identity, right? Yeah, and so that's like that. So in the United States, you're usually required, if you go there, to have 2 forms of ID, right? To cash a check, right? To get into a bar, right? And one has to be your driver's license. In Spain, does everybody have a driver's license?
Not everybody, but we have a national identity card.
Uh-huh.
And in that card, when you first get it, and at any time that you must renew it, you have to stamp your fingerprint.
Aha, yeah.
And it has basic information about you, apart from your name. It has your birth date, and several information as to where you live and who your parents are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, not so in the States, right? And so then you get your driver's license. Yeah, in Finland they have a virkatodistus, right? And because I work at the University of Helsinki, I have like a virkatodistus. It means that I have like an official record of everything that I've done. It tells how many languages I speak. It tells if I've been in the army. If I've been in trouble, it will have that there too with the cops. It tells all my degrees, which have been checked out, right? Nothing like that exists in the United States. And so if you think of, I guess, like Finnish U.S. differences, and maybe Spanish with residential registrations, social security numbers, finding out who lives where is completely different. So when Europeans look at Americans, if you don't know that, then it's like you might have like different views from the States, right? Any questions or comments about that before I move on to the next part? Anything? Yeah.
Why don't you have a identification card like in Spain? Why, I don't know. Why doesn't the government of the United States make an identification card for everybody here? From now, everyone who gets born in any part of the United States has to go with a fingerprint, sign, a photography. You have your identification card.
Because if you think about in 1893, Frederick Jackson Turner wrote something called The Frontier Theory of American Culture. And he talked about these cultural traits that Americans have. And he said that because, you know, they came there to that new world and had to build it from nothing, right? That they never had, like in Europe where you used to have, like, you know, the police, the church, the state, right? And so they never had that. And so there's features like individualism, things like that. I won't go into that in such detail because this is a short lecture. But one of the things is that one of the inherent beliefs in the States is they believe that their country is great, right? So if you're over there and you're an exchange student and you're having a bad day and you're pissed off at America, go talk to your exchange student friends about that, right? But don't tell the Americans that. It won't be very good. You know, and everybody's like that, right? Like if you hear some foreigner bashing Spain because they're having a bad day, nobody wants to hear that, right? Nobody wants to hear some foreigner talking bad things about their country, right? So Americans have this belief that their country is great, but they also have an extreme distrust of their government. That they don't trust the government. And they don't trust the government because I don't want somebody in Washington knowing all about me. That's not their business, right? And so they don't trust the government. And so like Clinton, when he was president, he said that all we need to know is, do you obey the law and do you pay your taxes, right? He was talking about gays in the military, and that's what he said. He said, it's nobody's business what you do, right? And so like people like Tim McVeigh, who's Tim McVeigh?
He was the one who bombed in Oklahoma, maybe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A federal building or something like that. I don't remember when.
Yeah. And those people are like they don't like the government people, right? And so they have cards printed out. When they caught McVeigh, right, they caught him because he didn't have a license plate on his car because he doesn't believe in that, right? And then they have cards printed. And in the United States, in order for them to take you to jail, they have to charge you with something. The police can't just take you to jail and hold you, right? And so they have these cards printed, and it says, "Dear officer, I refuse to speak to you. Please charge me with a crime or let me go." Right? And that's like an extreme example of these people that don't like the government, right? Europeans don't think like that. Finns certainly don't, right? That they see their government as a good thing, that they see the cops as basically clean, yeah, right? And they don't have that at all. And if the government wants to know all about you and you haven't done anything wrong, where's the problem, right? Other questions, comments?
In England, they don't have identity card either.
Hmm? So historical coming from England, administrative cultures. Yeah. Anything else? Okay, great. So the next thing I'm going to talk about, I'm really scared that this computer is good. I'm going to push the wrong button. Okay, here we go. So then, point one. You have this highly pluralistic factors with racial and ethnic diversity in the States. So then, and they talk about this melting pot, right? The great American melting pot. And it's a cultural metaphor that everybody comes from all these different countries and they melt together into like this one melted culture, right? And they talk about the great American melting pot. In recent years, they talk more about like mosaics or salad, right? Salad bowls. So if you think about like melting together like fondue or something, right? then that's one thing. But they talk about it's more like a salad or a mosaic because you have like Spanish Americans or Finnish Americans or Polish Americans or African Americans or Japanese Americans, and they hang on to elements of their own culture, right? So it doesn't melt together completely, and instead you've got like this mosaic of different cultures together. If you go to LA, for example, Korean town, K-town, right? Or it's like, you go there, it's like Korea, right? You could be Korean there and not speak any English at all, not a problem, right? You have your American passport, and if you've got the passport, then you're an American, right? But you have this salad bowl, right? So it doesn't all blend together. So what prevents it from going absolutely bananas, like the Balkans did in the 90s, right? Where everybody was just killing each other because they were Serb or Croat or Albanian. So why don't they do that, right? And you have to think about these traditional unifying factors, point two. American English language, big one. That people come there to learn English, people come there to speak English. And so in California, for example, Robert Kaplan, these people, were talking about bilingual education because you have so many Hispanics living in California. And they thought that, like, okay, we want these people to have the same opportunity as everybody else. So maybe when they're in school, we teach them English, but we teach them things like math, science, and Spanish, right? So they can understand it, right? Is that a good idea? Yes? No? Why?
I think that it would be better for them to learn that things in English because at least they are going to have to work in America in English.
Exactly. And that's what the Hispanics think, right? So you've got like these do-gooder liberals who think, okay, let's take care of these people and babysit them. And the Hispanics are like, no, I want my kid to learn English from day one because they'll have more opportunities. So then you've got the English language is a big unifying factor. I knew a Hungarian woman, she must have been 60, 70 then, and they had immigrated from Hungary, and they spoke Hungarian at home. And when she went to school the first day, that she had the neighbor. The Hungarian had a friend who was a neighbor, couldn't speak English, but one of her Hungarian friends could speak English. And she wrote notes that she pinned on the kids that said, these kids can't speak English, they're Hungarian, please take good care of them. And brought them to school the first day. And this woman can't speak Hungarian now, right? Because it just got erased, or her Hungarian's quite bad. Yeah, so then that's this American English. Second, high mobility via excellent physical, media, and communication. Okay, so mobility is a big thing. Both social mobility and physical mobility. So, for example, in Spain, do people normally like move? What's average? In Finland, the pattern is this. I'm not going to single you out to make you answer. But in Finland, normally you grow up someplace, then you go study someplace, and then after you graduate, you get a job someplace. And that's usually the three patterns of movement. Sometimes all takes place in the same city, right? Spain, similar? Yeah? I don't know. If you think about the times of your grandparents, right? Or your parents, right? Maybe now things are changing because the world is changing so quickly, right? Guess with Americans, how often do they move? Take a guess. Average American family moves every 2 years. Average. New houses, sometimes to the other side of the country, from California to New York, right? They're always moving, right? And because of that, it causes unity. Because if you go someplace, I mean, if you're thinking about like Finn, an average Finn has a few good friends, right? And they don't have more, and they don't need more. Right? Because they know everybody, right? And why should I go make new friends? Because I've got my friends, right? And if you live in the same town your whole life, very easy to do. Japanese are like that too. Americans, because they're always moving, have to be very open and very able to make new friends quickly and make quick working relationships with people, right? Finns talk about Americans being pinallinen, superficial, right? And it's because that they meet these Americans and then they're sharing all this information with this American, and then the American leaves and never calls them again, right? Or that they think like, I don't want to hear all this stuff, because a Finn doesn't share this kind of information with just anybody, right? And this comes from the moving around a lot, which brings unity, right? Implicit belief in the American creed and the American dream, point 2. What's the American creed? Anybody? This is going to be on the test. American creed is everyone is equal before the law. Okay? And it's this implicit belief that, you know, if somebody wrongs me, if I have to go before the judge and they get into this, then I'm going to be cleared or the truth will come out. Right? Big unifying factor. Right? It comes from this Christian faith that U.S., big Christian country, even though they separate the church and the state, right? Many kinds of Christianity, but still. And they believe that when you die, you're going to go before God, right? And then everybody's equal there. You get countries like Japan, many gods, many deities, right? So this belief in equality before the law, even though they've got a clean legal system, and more or less, right? That you know, equal before who? Equal before what? Right? And this equality before the law is a very big unifying factor. The American dream. What's the American dream? Come on.
Anyone can succeed and become from nothing to all. Something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So it means that the American dream means if I work hard and do what I'm supposed to do, then I will succeed. Right? Big unifying factor. And they believe it, right? I was in Russia doing a business thing, business conference. What is it? Business class for 18 Russians and 17 Finns at St. Petersburg State Polytechnic University. And one of the Russians was talking about how Russians don't want to fail, right? That you start a business, you fail, everybody laughs at you. So as a result, I'm not going to start a business. Right? Finns, similar also. The big dream with the Finn isn't to start your own company. It's to go work in a big company or for the government. Americans, you try a business, you fail. You try a business, you fail. You try a business, you fail. And maybe eventually you'll succeed. And we're taught this. We're taught this from children. Abraham Lincoln failed in everything that he ever did. We're taught this as a kid. Was the most hated man in America. During the American Civil War because of the high casualties and because he abolished slavery, right? When they took the Confederate Army in Atlanta, when they took Atlanta in October 1864, it meant that the North was going to win the war. And he was reelected for the second term as president. And, you know, people look at him like Jesus now, right? And, but, you know, had a really hard life. Failure, failure, failure. You know, trying to end slavery isn't a very popular thing to do if half the rich people in the country own slaves, right? And so we're taught this as kids. And people believe it. People believe it. So then if you try to organize a trade union, one time I was trying to organize trade unions. I was working in restaurants. It's like slavery in the States. And I said, okay, let's make a union, you know, shaft the boss. And couldn't get anybody to join. And the reason was because they believe that they're going to succeed, right? So you can have some guy who's a cook, because I was in university, I knew where I was going, but you can have some cook there who doesn't have health insurance, right? You know this healthcare stuff, right? Works like a slave, very little pay, won't sign the union card because he believes he's going to succeed someday, right? And so you don't have this. In Finland, everybody's in a union. 80% of the people are in a trade union. Right? And so you have like the boss's trade union negotiates with the workers' trade union, right? People in the States don't have labor. Like there is no trade union movement. It's like 15% and mostly government workers, so it's not like a real union, right? And it's because they believe that they're going to succeed through this American dream. Questions or comments about that? Anything? Okay, number 4. Yeah, let's skip to number 4, right? Because I'm almost out of time. Wait, how much time I got? Yeah. Skip to number 4. Okay, anyway, part 3. So part of the creed and the dream is a sense of national destiny. Opportunity, responsibility, equality comes from Puritanism, community involvement, and shared goals and education system. So that basically means that Americans, because of this creed and dream, believe that they have a national destiny. And it has good parts and it's got bad parts, right? Like, first they kill all the Indians, right? Or most of them anyway, and take over the whole country, right? And then they constantly expand. Then you have this age of imperialism, Spanish-American War, right? We take the Philippines, Cuba, space exploration, right? And so they believe that it's something that should constantly be expanding. Sometimes it leads to very bad things like Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, right? But it's this belief that you can somehow go there and civilize these people, right? And it's our job and our duty to do that, right? And people look to the United States for that. Like, okay, it goes really bad sometime, like Iraq or Afghanistan or Vietnam. But if there's some big disaster, right, America's got to send the Navy there to feed these people or take care of the hurricane or take care of the earthquake. And if America says no, we get bashed, right? So that's the next part, okay? So point 4. Since the 1960s, the population has been changing. You can just read that there. Read point 4. Got it? When you read it, look up, so then I'll start talking again, right? Okay, so since the 60s, large amounts of Hispanic people, Asians, other races, people from the Middle East, people from India have been immigrating. And so America is no longer like this white country like you would see in Gone with the Wind or some John Wayne movie, right? And when my students go there and they go like a bunch of people to work in Great America, this big amusement park, right, outside of Chicago. You go work for the summer. You can find Camp Counselors USA, but they also have other jobs. If you're Googling and you want to go to the States, if you're a full-time student, you get a J-1 visa and you can go work, and it doesn't cost anything. And they said the first thing that they noticed was that it wasn't a white country. That they said that there was all this racially divided, this ethnic mix, right? This salad bowl or stew, right? And so because of that, they get fed up, right? They get fed up and they say, okay, we don't want this white history anymore. What about us? Where's our share of the pie, right? And you can see now with like this election of Obama, right? That they've got a black president named Barack Hussein Obama, right? In the White House. So where does that come from? My dad, at Christmas, we were in LA, not this Christmas, the one before, and at my brother's, and kids are in bed, and so then we're drinking wine, and my dad just starts laughing to himself, and he's like, what? He goes, I really wish I could go to George Bush's country club and say like, hey, how does it feel? He said, you did such a bad job that we were able to elect a black man as president of the United States of America. And he goes, how does it feel? He goes, because, a Republican would never do that, not in 10,000 years, or even if hell freezes over, right? But then that really does show, I think that was a great thing for the country to do. Surprised me. And even I voted for him, but it surprised me. Because it shows, like, the dynamicness of it. And that, they're actually able to put Barack Hussein Obama in the White House. So it really does show, like, this, the new part of history, the new millennium, or the old times are really changed, right? Anyway, so you got that one. Okay? Questions about that? You had Hispanics during the Obama election. There's big racial tensions between the blacks and the Hispanics, if you know about this in the States. And my black friend was talking about that in New York a couple of years ago, and he was like, man, it's bad, it's bad. And he said that we're fighting for second place. They're fighting us for second place, right? The blacks and the Hispanics. But he said it was really bad. And so you had the Hispanics all voting for Hillary Clinton, right? To torpedo Obama. And then And then when she drops out, then they all vote for Obama because it's better, unless you're the odd-out Hispanic Republican, right? Okay, so you got that. Okay, 5. Rapidly expanding media choices, okay, have really done a lot to like undermine this American cultural unity. This Tim McVeigh is a good example, right? If you've got your internet, right, then you can decide, like when I was growing up, you had 4 television channels, right? And everybody watched Walter Cronkite on the news, and that's where they got their information. So everybody in the country had the same news program, right? Sports teams are also good for national unity because everybody in the country can follow one particular baseball team. Now, you know, I say here, 10-speed bicycle camping is my example in point 5. So if you're interested in 10-speed bicycle camping, then you can just pattern your life around that. And you can have your 10-speed bicycle camping forum, that on Facebook, and that can be all that you see, right? And then you become this tunnel vision person, which then hurts the national identity. In really bad examples, you can have people that become these anti-American, anti-government lunatics that blow up federal buildings, right? And it's because they don't have this like national news anymore. They don't have this national sense of identity, which leads to great social fragmentation, okay? Since the 60s, point 6, multicultural values have emerged, and they've gotten rid of this traditional education system where you teach people about Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin and these guys, the American democracy. And instead they talk more about, you know, they have like, okay, these are black heroes, or these are women heroes, or these are gay heroes, or these are Hispanic heroes. And it's good for everybody, but again, if they don't have this like civil religion, right, where you think like this is our country and this is what we're supposed to do, then the chances for the place to fall apart go way up, right? Which leads to this like Americans really don't know what their identity is now. So Bush starts a war, right, to consolidate the country, right? Point 7. What's affirmative action? Anybody? No?
To try, it's trying to help people from minorities to look at, for example, better access to higher education and promote equal opportunities for everybody.
Yeah, great.
Without race or gender or sexual orientation being considered.
Yeah. So then Jimmy Carter, if he hadn't done this, what did he do? He botched this Iran-Contra thing, the Iran hostage crisis, and the economy was really bad under Carter, and he had other problems. But anyway, great guy, and he really put that in to help black people. And so what it is if you try to get a government job, or even with companies, you have to fill out a form, right? And you can Google this on the internet, EEO forms, affirmative action forms, if you want to see what they look like. Looks like the census thing we just said, right? And they say like, okay, are you a woman? Are you white? Are you male? Okay, then you're out, right? And then they have this long list. What race are you? Hispanic, black, right? If you check that, you get points. Native Americans, American Indians get real big bonus points because they're so poor, right? So then, okay, racial minority. Also, combat veterans, right? Because if you've been serving the country and risking your life, you deserve something in return for that, right? Disabled people, right? Get bonus points. Are you disabled? Are you handicapped, right? And so you check all this off, right? And so then the companies have to have like a certain number of people from these racial minorities, right? And so then the big joke is, like, if you want to go get a really good government job, you can be an Indian woman who was in Iraq who lost an eye, right? And then you get like 200 bonus points on your application. right? But what does this mean, right, to the average American, right? I think it's a good idea. I mean, there's people who would never hire a black person no matter what, right? And you've got to do something to protect everybody, right? But if, for example, if you want to go to the University of Michigan Law School, right, then they get, if you're a white person, you get like 2,000 applications for every one place. If you're a black person, there's about 200, right? So you've got a much greater advantage to get in the law school, right? And across the board, that goes like that. But if we think about how I started, right, we were talking about this American creed, right, which is everybody's equal before the law, and the American dream, which is everybody can make it through their own hard work. And when you've got stuff like that there, it's not like that anymore, is it? Right? Which leads to greater social fragmentation, which can erupt sometimes in really bad things. Yeah, and I think that's timed. You got questions. Everybody think of a question. Yeah. Questions? Anything. Anything. I'll try to answer it. Take a second and talk to the person next to you and come up with a question.
Well, I would like to ask if it's how it's difficult or not in order to immigrate there or to go to work there. If I would like to go to work there, if it's difficult to get a visa or
okay, I took a bunch of students to New York a few years ago, and we had $2,000 an hour lawyers from Holland and Knight, big law firm, overlooking the World Trade Center, the Ground Zero, right? And they talked about that for 2 hours, right? And okay, so then you've got different kinds of visas. My first, what I would say, like if you want to go work and see what it's like, look through this like Camp Counselors USA. You can write that down. You can Google it, and they also have like Work Study USA or Work Travel. And if you're a full-time student, you can get a job there teaching in summer camp, or it's not even like you can work in the kitchen if you prefer to do that, or do administration, right? If you don't want to work with the kids, and then you can get a visa to go there for the summer. And then you can stay a month after you finish working, right? And then come back, okay? Then there's another kind of visa where if you have a company, Nokia wants to bring me there and I'm a Finn. Or my friend Francis is in Washington now. He's from Ghana, right? And he's a Nokia guy, boss in Nokia. And so what he would do is Nokia guarantees his job. And he's a specialist engineer with special qualifications. And they say that, like, okay, we're bringing this guy here on an expat contract for this amount of time, and he works for our company, and that's not a problem, right? But you have to have a special skill where the company can prove that you're not taking a job away from an American. One problem. Second problem is you're tied to the company, right? So it means if you quit, you lose your visa, right? And so if you wanted to immigrate, not so easy. They have a visa lottery system, right? Which you've seen. Don't pay for that, right?
Green card.
For the green card lottery, yeah. And with that one, you don't pay, pay us $50 and we'll show you how to do this. Just find the U.S. government, State Department, and just send in your papers. And if you're lucky, if you're one of the ones that they pick, you're in, right? If you invest over, I think it's $1 million. I'm not 100% sure, but it's a large amount of money, right? In some American company, then you're in, right? 500,000, $1 million, I don't know. It's a lot of money. So then lots of these Chinese from Hong Kong, when they became part of the People's Republic, they were scared because they didn't know what was going to happen. And you get lots of those guys in Vancouver and Washington State, LA. Study visas, those are easy to get if you got a place to study or an exchange. And then the easiest way is just get married. But if you get married, right, then you have to prove, that was weird. Yeah, when you get married, you have to prove that you have enough money to support, if you want to bring your wife back or husband, right, you have to prove that you have enough money to support them for 2 years so they won't go on welfare, right? And then you have to have an interview with the consular. And with me, he was really nice. But then I knew this American who married a Polish girl, and they were just nasty. My Russian friends have horrible stories about stuff like that. And they were asking, like, okay, like, what's going on here? Are you guys really in love? Did you just marry him for the visa? And it's his wife, right? I mean, it's like, and I was like, man, I would write my congressman immediately. What's your name, sir? You can't talk to my wife that way, right? And you write your congressman, and then they clean that guy's clock. But they do that stuff, right? My friends in Russia were all complaining, you know, they're attractive, 30-something, single girls with no kids, and they can't get visas. Or it's hard for them to get a visa. It's too much red tape, right? Yeah, that's how you get your visa. Get married, it's easier. Other questions or comments or observations? Yeah.
A friend of mine who is living in California, I think, and he told me that when people in America has to go to work, they spend 3 hours to go to the work and another 3 hours to come back home. Not all the population, but part of the population. That's it true?
In LA, they have terrible traffic problems. So in LA, probably you could, if you worked someplace far. But in Finland, that's becoming increasingly common, that people live in one city and commute. Because most of the jobs in Finland are in Helsinki. It's a very dangerous, bad sociological trade. And so then, like I live in Tampere, which is 2 hours from Helsinki. Hour and a half by train, and I go to the university in Helsinki. Yeah, so it's same in Finland. And people that live in Long Island, like this. I'm sure this guy from Holland and Knight, the lawyer, the Harvard lawyer or Princeton lawyer that was talking to us, older guy. I'm sure that he lives out on Long Island. No, he moved to Manhattan, but before he lived on Long Island. But I had friends whose parents, you know, in Long Island you can have like a house with a yard, and the dad just commutes 2 hours each way, you know, because he'd rather him pay than the kids, you know. Yeah, so yeah, that can, normally people live quite close to their workplace. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if I have understood very well the problem of reverse discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's not exclusive from the United States, because I think in one country in Europe I know very well, they had problems because the places for women and men and for the university were not the same, and there was too much women in the university because they had that kind of positive discrimination. So I think that's more a global problem, not exclusive for the United States. Maybe in the United States they have more cultural diversity, and it's another part of that positive discrimination, but I think it's a global problem.
Mm.
It's my opinion.
In Finland, you're protected completely. Like, these laws, even stronger than EU laws, anti-discrimination laws, but it happens. For gypsies, Romani, that they're marginalized. And it's, you know, they did a study. They sent like a woman, a guy, and a gypsy, a Romani person, to try to get jobs with like the same papers. And then the guy got like, I don't know, went to 10 places, got 8 offers. The girl, it was like 7 offers. Romani. So you do have that. And the laws are there to protect them. But I don't know this problem. But I think it's a good thing to protect the weak. That's in my opinion. But it undermines, but then, you know, hey, if I wanted to go to law school and they let in somebody that was black that had lower grades than me, I'd be really angry. Right? Because it's not fair. Right? People like Condoleezza Rice, like my black friends, my friend Bo, you know, they call her Aunt Thomasina, you know, Uncle Tom from Uncle Tom's Cabin, because she's a black Republican, right? And that's like a traitor, right? But you know, somebody like that, she's against any kind of that. She thinks that it undermines the credibility of smart black people if they think that you got your job because you're on this quota system. And so it depends on your political point of view and not your color of your skin. Or gender or whatever. Anything else?
In America, I know that if anyone wants to go to a hospital, they need to have a secure. What happens with the American creed, that everyone is equal?
Yeah, the whole thing, you know, like these are ideals. And I mean, this is a very short class, but I teach people in my longer course in Helsinki or in Tampere that, you know, how this Constitution and these great ideals of the United States and how everyone should be equal. And it's, you know, and those guys that wrote that, you know, Alexander Hamilton, who wrote it, was killed in a duel, right? These were savages. I mean, these were primitive people, but very good ideas. And so you have to keep in mind that the ideals of America are like, what is it? Human beings can't do that, right? And so even though they do have these lofty ideas, you know, we've had these terrible discrimination problems. Slavery, they had human slaves, you know, until 120 years ago, right? 150 years ago, right? I mean, human beings can't do this equality thing. Maybe. They're trying, and they're getting a lot better at it, right? And the prognosis for the future is really good. But, you know, yeah, I mean, they talk about this equality, but at the same time, it doesn't exist. Does it answer that?
Yes.
Yeah?
Would you like to the end, Mark?
I'm at the end, yeah.
All right.
If it's okay. Yeah.
If you don't have more questions, I think that they have more lessons now, so this is the end. Thank you very much.